Joining me now is CTV News political commentator and the former leader of the NDP, Tom Mulcair. Tom, good morning to you.
Good to be with you, Marcia.
So we're in the final stretch. What will you be watching for from the candidates in these final closing days of the campaign?
I'll be paying attention to where they're spending their time. We saw Mark Carney do a whirlwind tour of British Columbia yesterday, hitting a bunch of NDP and Conservative ridings that the Liberals hope to be able to win. We'll be also following what happens in and around Ottawa, because, of course, there's been recent reporting, especially in the Globe and Mail, that Mr. Poilievre might actually be in trouble in his own riding. That poll was interesting. It would indicate a closing of the gap at the top line level, down to 3%, but it should always be borne in mind, as Nick Nanos likes to point out, that the Liberal vote is far more efficient. In other words, it's better at producing seats because it's better spread out than the Conservative vote. At the same time, the Liberals have shown an incredible propensity and ability to eat into the vote of the NDP and of the Bloc Québécois in the province of Quebec. It's interesting, they've been doing such a good job against the Bloc that Yves-François Blanchet has found a whole new theme. After having said on the air on Sunday on Tout le monde en parle, a very well-watched television show, that he knew that Carney was going to win the election, now he's trying to say, but you know what? The Bloc Québécois could be his bestie. And he's basically auditioning to be Mark Carney's Jagmeet Singh, the way Singh was the partner of Trudeau. I don't think anybody's going to be fooled by it. And it's an indication of the fact that he knows he's going to lose a bunch of seats, including quite possibly his own. And by the way, you know, if you look at that as one of the themes of what's going to happen on Monday, Marcia, we've just mentioned what the Globe and Mail has been reporting about the difficulties of Mr. Poilievre in his own riding. I've just mentioned, for example, that Mr. Blanchet could very well lose his riding in Quebec, but Elizabeth May is anything but re-elected in her riding. And of course, there's been a lot of talk that Jagmeet Singh might have difficulty in his. So if this were a TV show about master chefs, these chefs, a bunch of them would be in for the high jump probably at the end of the vote, once the votes are all counted on Monday.
Well, yeah, I don't want to get too ahead of ourselves, but I think a lot of people have considered that. And specifically, Tom, what happens if Pierre Poilievre loses his own riding? What becomes of him then?
There is a technique in our system where if a leader loses, then somebody who has a very safe seat can step aside and let the leader run. You normally only see that when it's that party that has formed the government. Example, Robert Bourassa's Liberals formed a government. Bourassa lost his own riding. One of his MNAs, as they're called in Quebec, stepped down in the safest Liberal riding, Saint Laurent, and Bourassa got elected there so he could run the government as an elected official. It would be more rare to see that in the case of an opposition party. But I don't think that Mr. Poilievre would have any difficulty finding one of his MPs who would be willing to step aside, because unlike Mr. Scheer, Andrew Scheer, who was, you know, one of the previous leaders, or Aaron O'Toole, I sense that within Conservative ranks, people will, to stay with the image, close ranks behind Pierre Poilievre. They know that he brought the party well ahead of the Liberals, that a triple whammy of Trump's arrival, Trudeau's departure, and Carney's arrival completely changed the landscape, and they weren't able to adapt to it. But he's put on a very strong campaign right up until the end. You know, we're seeing that the numbers remain close at the top line level. But by the way, those close numbers are something that it could actually work against the Conservatives, because as long as people were saying, oh, it's the Liberals, it's the Liberals, it's the Liberals, then there was less incentive to come out and vote on Monday. But now if it's close, for people who are not, you know, very much in favor of Mr. Poilievre, they're going to have an incentive to come out and vote. So it's a bit tricky. There's still lots of politics left in this thing, but I do think that the concrete is starting to set and harden, and I think it's looking very much like the Liberals' election at this stage.
And finally, do you have any thoughts then, kind of getting back to your first point about the Liberals being able to get the vote out, when we see that a record number of Canadians turned out to vote early, does that play in one party's favor over another, Tom?
That's like reading tea leaves. That's a bit of a tough one, but what it does show is engagement, and we can look at historical examples. 2011, the vote was very suppressed, very low amongst young people. 60% of people 18 to 25 did not vote. Stephen Harper wins a majority. Very low vote translated into a majority for the Conservatives. 2015, Trudeau engages a lot of people, especially young people. People come out to vote in record numbers, and the Liberals win, they're only majority. So we can take away from that is that when people are engaged and they're out voting, that it does, based on historical examples, seem to favor the Liberals. At the same time, the 7.5 million votes that are already in the ballot box can't change. And the votes in certain ridings represent half of the votes that were cast in the last general election. So if that indeed is a reflection of where the polls were when those votes were cast, which is still an even stronger Liberal lead, then it would be very difficult for the Conservatives to be able to surmount that.
Tom Mulcair for us. Tom, thanks for all that. Tom, of course, is our CTV News political commentator and the former leader of the NDP.